So somebody in one of my intimate reading videos said that my books were too childish. We'll see about that, won't we? I have my true crime book here. 3 books in one, full of gory, disgusting details. Not really. I won't scare you too much. But if you are interested in strange, this is more kind of strange stories, things that have happened that are unsolved, or some of them are solved. We'll see. Let's read the first story in here. Which is a story of 2 Marys. So, here we go. How am I going to hold this? I don't know. Okay. I thought it would be easy, but it's not. Okay. In the 1984 science fiction classic The Terminator, a murderous cyborg from the future played by Arnold Schwarzenegger. We'll do this. Hunted women in Los Angeles named Sarah Connor in order to stop a woman with that same name from giving birth to a man who would kill the cyborg's masters in the future. The plot was totally outlandish and not meant to portray or emulate any real event or situation. But a pair of murders in Houston, Texas in 2000 shocked area residents, and to sci-fi fans it appeared to be a case of reality imitating art. In the span of less than 1 week, 2 women, both named Mary Morris, were murdered in eerily similar ways in Houston. Once the local media made the connections between the 2 women's names, then other connections were quickly made. The 2 women looked alike, the manner of their murders was similar, and their bodies were discovered in similar locations. With that many similarities, most people were convinced that the murders were somehow connected. Was the serial killer using Terminator as an inspiration for his sick homicidal fantasies? I was going to say homicidal. The residents of Houston were on edge in the late months of 2000. Anyone could be the killer, and any woman named Mary Morris could be the next victim. Mary Henderson Morris was a 48-year-old wife and mother who worked hard as a loan officer at Chase Bank in Houston. She and her husband had built a good life for themselves and lived in the reasonably affluent Houston neighborhood of Spring Valley. Just thought of a way of setting up that makes a little bit more sense. You know what I'm saying? Maybe. Okay, let's start that again. Mary Henderson Morris was a 48-year-old wife and mother who worked hard. Can you see that? Yeah, just back. Who worked hard as a loan officer at Chase Bank in Houston. She and her husband had built a good life for themselves and lived in the reasonably affluent Houston neighborhood of Spring Valley. They were hard-working, successful people who were liked by all the neighbours, friends and family. By all accounts, the couple had good relationships, and neither was involved in drugs or criminal activity, which makes this part of the case most puzzling. The morning of October 12, 2000 began as any other in the Morris household. Mary woke up first, got ready for work, and left the house at about 6 a.m. So early. But Mary never made it to work. Mary's husband of 5 years, Jay, usually spoke with her several times during the day on the phone, so he began to worry when the afternoon came and he had yet to hear from his wife. Mary's daughter from a previous marriage, Marilyn Blalock, and Jay filed a missing persons report early that evening. About the same time, a burned car was discovered in a vacant field. Oh, the ninja skills. Unbelievable. Okay. A call was made to the Harris County Sheriff's Department at about 10 a.m. that morning about what was believed to be burning debris or leaves. Later in the day, police arrived at the wooded area to find that it was not debris or leaves that were burning, but an automobile. After the fire was put out, the Sheriff's Department determined that a charred female body was inside. It was the body of Mary Henderson Morris. The fire made it impossible for coroners to determine the method of death, although it was quickly ruled a homicide. A search revealed that Morris' purse and wedding ring were missing, which suggested robbery. But too many questions remained. If it were a robbery, why was her car not taken? Why would a robber or robbers go to such lengths to conceal part of their crime? The crime was obviously not a carjacking because the car was burned. Even if it was an attempted carjacking gone bad, there would have been no reason to take the car and its owner to a remote location, kill the owner, then burn the car. And why was the car dumped and burned in a vacant lot? The more investigators looked at the case, the less it made sense. There were also no witnesses to her abduction or murder. Due to circumstances, authorities determined that there was no ordinary murder case, but little did they know how extraordinary the case would become. Just 4 days later, after the Morris family put Mary to rest on October 16th, Blaylock made the painful yet seemingly simple journey to the coroner's office to retrieve some of her mother's personal effects. Instead, she walked into an episode from The Twilight Zone. "They told me that they still had Mary Morris's body," recalled Blaylock. "I was freaking out. I was thinking we just had the funeral. I saw the remains, and I was looking at something that wasn't even my mother. It turns out that the woman Marilyn Blaylock saw on the coroner's table was not her mother, but it was in fact another woman named Mary Morris. Mary McGuinness Morris." So, let's talk about her now. In many ways other than just the name, Mary McGuinness Morris shared a number of similarities with Mary Henderson Morris, which makes this case all that more eerie. Although Mary McGuinness was a bit younger than Mary Henderson, at 39 years old, both women were attractive, gregarious brunettes. Mary McGuinness was also a professional woman who shared a nice suburban home with her husband. On October 16, 2000, the Harris County Sheriff's Department found the body of Mary McGuinness Morris, badly beaten with a single gunshot to her head, in the location about 25 miles from where Mary Henderson Morris was found days earlier. Mary McGuinness was also found murdered in her car in a vacant lot in Harris County. Although the vacant lots were located on different ends of the county, both spots had an eerie familiarity. Yeah. In life and death, the two women shared some uncanny similarities, which raised the obvious question: who would want to kill the two Marys? Dun dun dun. Suspects and theories. Although authorities were at a loss trying to find suspects and reasons for the murder of Mary Henderson Morris, they quickly zeroed in on two potential perps for Mary McGuinness' case. At the time of her death, Mary McGuinness worked as a nurse practitioner and medical director at Union Carbide in Houston. Her supervisors noticed that she was a good employee who got along with all of her co-workers, and likewise almost all of her co-workers liked Mary, with the exception of one, Dwayne Young. Dwayne Young was a nurse who worked alongside Mary, and as their time working together progressed, he apparently became obsessed with her. Young's obsession with Mary began innocently enough. He hung around her desk at work and engaged in conversation whenever he could. The behaviour at first seemed to Mary McGuinness to be more of a puppy love type situation than that of an obsessed maniac. But eventually Young's facade of a lost puppy dog was lifted to reveal the stalker that he was. Excuse me. As Young's menacing looks and comments towards Mary reached creepy crescendo, she found the words "death to her" scrawled on her desk calendar. After numerous complaints to her bosses about Young's behaviour and borderline illegal behaviour, Young's inappropriate and borderline illegal behaviour, which was verified by co-workers, the stalker nurse was fired on October 13th, just 2 days before Mary disappeared. The note scrawled on Mary's desk proved to be the last straw. Weeks before her disappearance and death, Mary McGuinness bought a handgun that she kept hidden in her car. Owning a gun in the United States, especially in the state of Texas, is no big deal, as we all know. And some even consider it not just a right, but an obligation. Mary McGinnis, though, was never a hunter or a gun enthusiast, so when she started packing a pistol, her closest friend and family members knew that she was frightened of something or someone. Although Mary was a bit of a private person, she apparently felt that the threats from Young, or perhaps someone else, were grave enough that she needed to be armed, because she did tell a couple of her closest friends about the handgun. Mary was no expert in firearms, so her husband gave her the gun and showed her how to use it. Also, the day young Mary was fired. The day Young was fired, Mary's employers told her to stay home in order to defuse the situation, which turned into a scene anyway, as Young demanded to see Mary and had to be escorted off the premises. October 15th was the last day Mary was seen alive. By all accounts, it was another Sunday for Mary McGinnis. She ran a number of errands and visited a friend named Laurie Gemmell. According to Gemmell, McGinnis called her from a store during the afternoon to tell her, "There is someone here who is giving me the creeps." Not long after that call, McGinnis then called 911. The transcript of the 911 call has never been released to the public, but a detective who worked on the case heard the tape and said that their blood had chilled listening to it. After the 911 call, Mary McGinnis's trail went cold. When Mary did not return home that evening, her husband of 17 years, Mike, filed a missing persons report. In an unfortunate twist that brought Mary McGinnis' case together with Mary Henderson's, the body of McGinnis was found shot to death in a vacant lot outside Houston. Despite the similarities of both women being found murdered in their cars, the method of murder was clear in the McGinnis case. She had died of a single gunshot to the head with her own gun. At first glance, it looked like a suicide, but as homicide investigators examined the scene more closely, they learned that the scene looked staged and it was instead a poor attempt to throw them off. Mary had been beaten and gagged, and her car keys were left outside the car. Investigators quickly learned about Dwayne Young, who then went to the top of their suspect list. But as homicide detectives looked into Young's background, Mike Morris soon joined Young as a person of interest. Good show, that is. Morris supplied investigators with the samples of his DNA and gave initial interviews. But he declined to take a polygraph exam. A polygraph. He declined to take. It's not really that funny. He declined to take a polygraph exam, hired an attorney, and refused to cooperate with investigators as the case dragged on. Morris also refused to allow his 16-year-old daughter to be interviewed by police, since it is a person's constitutional right not to talk to the police in the United States. Morris did nothing legally wrong in that respect, although his actions placed him further under the police radar. Well, yeah. The more investigators focused on Morris, the more they learned there was trouble in paradise in the Morris household. Although it was never proved, allegations of infidelity by both Mike and Mary surfaced. Infidelity is always considered to be a motive in spousal murder. Whether it is murder to get rid of a spouse in order to be with a paramour, or done out of anger towards a cheating spouse, unfaithfulness must always be considered by police. The infidelity motive seemed to go nowhere, but it was not long before more perplexing inconsistencies came to light. It was learned that Mike had taken out a $500,000 life insurance policy on Mary, which alone is not enough to convict or even get someone arrested for murder. But greed is one of the most common motivations for murder throughout history, which is just a crying shame. How can you want money more than someone's life in your life? Like, don't get it. Money is just, that's people, isn't it, really? Then there was the mysterious phone call. Records indicate that on the afternoon of October 15th, about 2 hours after she called 911, Mary received a phone call on her cell phone from Mike. Mike claims that he did in fact make the call when he was with his daughter at a movie, but that the call went straight to voicemail. Records show that the call was answered and lasted for 4 minutes. Morris claimed that the phone company must have made a mistake. Yeah, of course they did. Although it is possible that the phone company could have made a mistake, it seemed extremely convenient for the suspect in a murder investigation that such a mistake, which is nearly unheard of, would happen at this critical juncture. Mary McGuinness was also not robbed. In fact, the only valuable item that appeared to have been taken from her was a ring, which later was found in the possession of their daughter. Oh my God. Mike later told investigators that his wife had lost the ring before her murder and that he and his daughter had found it in the house later. The final piece of circumstantial evidence that points towards Mike Morris as the perpetrator in his wife's murder is the actual murder weapon. The gun that was used to kill Mary McGuinness was actually Mike's gun. He gave the gun to Mary after Dwayne Young's stalking reached its peak, and only he and some of Mary's closest friends even knew about the gun, or where she had hid it underneath the seat. Clearly, many of Mary's friends, law enforcement, and the people of Houston in general began to think that Mike was good for his wife's murder, but the evidence was just not there to make an arrest, never mind win a conviction in front of a jury. Eventually, Mike and his daughter moved back to his native West Virginia, where he still presumably lives to this day. But even if Mike Morris or Dwayne Young was responsible for the murder of Mary McGuinness Morris, the elephant in the room remains. Was her murder connected to Mary Henderson Morris? A hit gone wrong? Once the theory of a homicidal cyborg from the future that came to Houston to kill women named Mary Morris was eliminated, investigators were left trying to determine if 2 crimes were connected or just some strange macabre coincidence. It is difficult to get past the 2 victims' similar names, appearance, the type of location where their bodies were discovered, and the manner in which they were killed. Because of the plethora of similarities, many have concluded that either Mike Morris or Dwayne Young hired a hitman to kill Mary McGuinness, but in a cruel case of mistaken identity also killed Mary Henderson. An anonymous caller to the Houston Chronicle said, "They got the wrong Mary Morris," in reference to the Mary Henderson Morris. But investigators remain unconvinced that the 2 homicides are related. As far as the dates go, they are so close that they could be linked, said Harris County Sheriff Detective Wayne Coolman. But when someone is hired to kill someone, they are going to have their information and know their habits. Hitmen don't just go out with nothing. Like, surely you tell them where they live. Like, I want you to kill my wife. She lives in my house, which is such and such. I don't know. I've never hired a hitman, so I wouldn't know. As of 2016, both cases remain cold. Sometimes reality is stranger than fiction. See, now wasn't that nice? I actually think this book is pretty cool. Some details are upsetting, I guess. This isn't as bad as my magazine though, which is real crime as opposed to true crime. I was reading a story in there a couple of months ago and I actually felt really faint. I was laying in bed, so it was the best place to be really, but I just started feeling really sick and horrible and I couldn't carry on. So I don't really know why I read them. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. That story was longer than I thought it was, but that's good. And there are loads in here. I love the smell of it as well. It's got like strange disappearances of people. There was a weird one, I could read it next time maybe, of a brother went missing and then years later another brother went missing, and it was both like literally, where's this one? Literally like they were there and then they weren't, sort of thing, like, you know, during the day and whatever. Really bizarre how the second brother was just out with a friend snowboarding, I think, or some skiing, I don't know, and the friend just sort of turned around and suddenly he wasn't there anymore. Isn't it weird? Scary too. Anyway. Thanks for watching. Oops.